As discussed, after the death of Constantine, Christianity would go on to gain great prominence in the Roman Empire. It's interesting to note that it's less than a century from the Edict of Milan outlawing persecution of Christians in 313 to the outlawing of paganism under Theodosius around 395. Now into this largely Christianized world was born a man known as Augustine in Hippo, North Africa in 354 AD. Although the man was raised as a Christian, he went on to become a Manichaean, was also interested in Neoplatonism before finally reverting to Christianity. Now, most people will be familiar with St Augustine as a theologian, and I suppose you're asking, well, what's a theologian doing in a series about the history of philosophy? Now, I think the reason he's important from a historical perspective is that Christianity became such a key player in the Roman Empire as a form of glue, binding everyone from the emperor to the servants all together. And so what seemed to be fairly trivial questions of theology had massive political import. And moving on to discuss the life of Augustine, according to him, his life, first as a nominal Christian and then as a Manichaean, was fairly debauched, and he had affairs with both sexes. He writes in his autobiography, "I went to Carthage, where shameful love boiled around me like boiling oil." And in the same salacious autobiography, the Confessions, he uttered the phrase as a prayer, "Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet." Now, interestingly enough, alongside this scandalous lifestyle, he managed to have a stellar academic career, which took him from Africa to Rome and then on to the imperial court at Milan. He was in Milan, where he came into contact with Neoplatonism, and then after that, he had a change of heart and became a Christian, and put aside his concubine of over 13 years, with whom he'd had a child, shortly before cleaning up and becoming engaged to a 10-year-old aristocratic heiress. Now, shortly after this, he had a bit of a crisis during which his mother died. He returned to Africa and decided not to marry this heiress. And he subsequently gave away his inheritance, became a priest and then later a bishop in 395 in Hippo. Now, one of his key jobs as bishop was to combat heresies, and heresy is basically a deviation from Orthodox Christianity. Most of the heresies in the early church centered around the nature of Jesus and the Trinity. Now, the nature of Jesus is, according to Orthodox Christianity, to be twofold in that he had both a human and a divine nature. And there's also the matter of the Trinity, which is the relationship between God the Father, Jesus the Son, and this third entity known as the Holy Spirit. Now, all of these are mentioned in the Bible, but the exact relationship between them is not massively clear. So most of the heresies centre around these points. I've only got time to discuss a few, so I want to kind of discuss three key heresies, which are particularly important to Augustine, and also a little bit about his Manichaean religion, now, which he previously believed in. Now, the first of these is the Arian heresy, and that's this idea that's put forward by a guy named Arius that Christ is subordinate to the Father, and was created by him. Now, ultimately, this was crushed in the East and Roman Empire by around 380, but it's important because it spread to the Germans by then, and this would go on to become a major source of difference between the Romans and the Germans. The second of the heresies was Donatism. Now, to give you a bit of background, the predecessor to Constantine had persecuted the Christians in North Africa, and the African governor at the time had been fairly nice, and he'd said, as long as you hand over your books, there's going to be no further trouble. Now, some of the North Africans didn't like this, and they said that people who'd handed over their books weren't fit to be called Christians and they couldn't be readmitted. These were the Donatists. Now, Augustine conspired to ensure that they could be people who had handed over their books could be readmitted to the faith, and the Donatists would be crushed. But unfortunately for Augustine, this resulted in dreadful persecution and a confiscation of the property against the Donatists. So, in effect, he ended up accidentally visiting much of the pain he had sought to prevent from others on the Donatists themselves. Now, this final heresy, Marcionism, kind of ties into Manichaeanism, which was the early religion Augustine believed in. And this was because both were designed to get around the problem of evil. The problem of evil is that in Christianity you've got a God that's good and all-powerful, but to many people the world which God is alleged to have created does not appear good. Now there's sort of two solutions that these two ideas, one heresy and one alternate religion, come up to answer this. The first, the Marcions believed that the God who created the world was different from the God who had sent Jesus into the world. And the God who created the world was bad, and the God who sent Jesus into the world was good. And so this was an idea, one way of getting around the problem of evil, but of course it creates a lot of other theological problems. And the second was this Manichaean religion set forward by the Iranian prophet Mani, which is this idea there's actually a balance between good and evil, and so that got around the problem, but it also meant that there was no all-powerful good God. Now Augustine's own solution to the problem of evil was fairly interesting, and it's to see evil not as a positive entity in itself, but simply as the absence of good. So that kind of sums up the first part of Augustine's life, and with that it's pretty constant, with the exception of one major event which I'll discuss at the end of the next episode.